So I've made a list of my favorite 15 movies of 2015 so far, and I can't make a best of list without a worst of list. So now I'm going to count down the top 15 movies that are the worst of 2015 in my opinion. Now again, this is just my opinion, so if you disagree with it, that is completely fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. And I know there's at least one movie on this list that a lot of people are going to say, no, that was one of the best movies of the year. I can't believe you consider that a bad movie. Well, here's the other disclaimer. Not all of these movies are movies that I consider legitimately bad. For me, anything lower than 2 stars, and I mean lower than 2 stars, is a bad film. 2-star movies and 2.5-star movies are still movies that are sort of meh, or movies that I can enjoy watching the first time, but never have the will to watch again, or movies that if I see it again, I start liking it less and less and less. Or they're movies that are kind of bad or kind of meh and boring that have potential to be better than it really is. So with that said, let's get down with the countdown. Okay, out of the 67 movies that I've seen so far this year, the number 15 worst film right now is Get Hard. So yeah, a lot of people consider this movie very racist and very horrible and very immature, but at the same time, it's everything you expect a Will Ferrell movie and a Kevin Hart movie to be, and it melds decently well together. Again, it's a comedy that a lot of people are not going to like the humor, and I completely understand. Humor is hard to come by when it comes to certain things, but I laughed most of the way through this movie. The only problem is it's not as great as I hoped it would be, and some of the humor is a little awkward, and the end scene is kind of weird. It's got some weird moments in it that feel like a Will Ferrell movie, but at the same time it's just, I don't know. But overall, it wasn't that bad of a time in theater, and there was some potential in some of the great comedy parts in this movie, so it's a 2.5 for me. So it's not going to stay in my worst of 2015, but yeah, it's pretty bad. I can understand a lot of people hating it, but it's kind of funny still. Alright, now number 14 is another 2.5-star movie for me, and it's another movie that a lot of people think is the worst film of 2015, and that is Seventh Son. But I'm a big fan of fantasy, and I can stand a lot of the cliched stuff in fantasy because I just love it so much. Just like how I can stand a lot of the horror cliches because I like horror so much. So some of it didn't really bother me. The 2 most experienced actors in the movie were a bit of a mixed bag. Jeff Bridges has his moments, but sometimes he's just really And Julianne Moore has her moments, but sometimes she's just a really awful bad villain. The actors I thought were the best in the movie, I thought, was Ben Barnes, who is the main character, and I felt he was a good, likable hero. And yes, it's cliched, yes, it's a character you've seen many times before, but I thought he played it pretty well. And then the love interest, Alicia Vikander, she is really good in this movie too, and I thought she was the best part of this movie. And the romance felt like it made sense, and you could connect with it, and it's not as bad as a lot of forced romances are in young adult type books that are turned into movies. The only really big deal with it is the fight scenes were a little too fast. It's not as fast as Ghost Rider. Like in Ghost Rider, all he had to do was hit him with his chain, and then they explode, and that's the end of the frickin' fight. This one has more fighting in it, but it's still really quick, and it feels like they were rushed. Alright, number 13 was a film I was really not looking forward to seeing. Everything I saw with the trailer felt like it was going to be too sappy, too cheesy. It felt like it was going to force some sympathy into you, and it does not succeed. I am talking about Black or White, and There are plenty of people that were fooled by this movie into thinking it was good, but it really isn't. I know, I say everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and I guess it just depends on what kinds of movies you see. It was a little too sappy, a little too forced, a little too cheesy. Some of the dialogue is plain awful and goofy. There is some moments where I feel like this could have been something good. I legitimately feel that way. And the chemistry between Kevin Costner and the girl are phenomenal. But other than that, that's all that the movie has going for it. And the fight scene at the end, I didn't know whether to worry about the characters or just start laughing. Now on paper, this sounds like it could have been a good idea. It feels like it could have been a dangerous fight because Kevin Costner is completely intoxicated and the person he's fighting is completely high, so they're impaired and it's dangerous because they're next to a pool. But when you watch it on film, it felt like they were just bumbling idiots just trying to fight, and it was kind of hilarious. It felt like really bad slapstick humor. Okay, number 12 is another comedy that happens to have Kevin Hart in it, and it is The Wedding Ringer. Yes, you've seen this before. It's very cliched. A lot of the things you've seen, but it's done in a little different and unique way. With the whole Wedding Ringer concept, it makes it feel like it's unique, but a lot of the elements in it you've seen before in other comedies, other wedding comedies, and a lot of just movies in general. At the same time, this is still a 2.5-star movie for me because I was pleasantly surprised, and there were some scenes where I laughed and just couldn't stop laughing. And one of those scenes is with Josh Peck, if you know who that is, and look him up. There's this one scene in Wedding Ringer with him in it that is completely hilarious. And then the football scene, while cliched, was really hilarious as well. At the same time, I have to commend it for its twist because while a lot of people feel it's forced, unnecessary, and out of nowhere, if you actually look closely and watch it again, there are some subtle things that they put in the movie to help weave in the twist through the movie so that it makes sense. And it's nothing like The Sixth Sense or anything, but there is some rewatchability if you're looking for those subtle moments that help make the twist make sense. Alright, before we get into the top 10 worst films of 2015, number 11 is a pretty big disappointment. I can see why it was moved from being a blockbuster 2015 and brought to February of 2015, and that is Jupiter Ascending. Yes, the plot is convoluted. There's a lot of inconsistencies with the movie. Mila Kunis was not good in the movie, and while Channing Tatum is likable, he wasn't as great as I hoped he would be. And our main villain, Eddie Redmayne, oh my God, I don't know what to say for him. He was great. He was great in the Theory of Everything. He definitely deserved a nomination. While I don't know if he deserved a win, he definitely deserved a nomination, and he was great in that film. And this one, I don't think it's as bad acting. It's just, I don't know if someone told him that he should go and act like this for this character, but it is comical and it is ridiculous. You almost have to see the movie just for that. I'm telling you. There's a lot of moments in the film it blatantly tells you, because I get it. Mila Kunis' character is new to this whole galaxy thing, so they have to explain things to her. But some things aren't explained, and you have to realize it for yourself. So it's inconsistent that way. It's inconsistent with the inhuman characters that are sometimes, some of them are more animal than human, and some are more human than animal, even among the same species. And there's a lot of crazy things like that that just make no sense. And some of the action sequences, you have to pay attention because sometimes there's a very subtle thing that happens in it. One of them in particular with Channing Tatum fighting the dragon-like character. There's one subtle moment that if you're not paying attention, you could completely think, what the hell happened? I don't understand. But it's there, and the movie gives you clues to it, but you have to pay attention. And the weird thing is, when you start explaining everything, your brain turns off and you feel like, okay, I don't need to pay attention. It'll explain everything to me. Well, it doesn't all the time. And sometimes you actually have to think. So it's inconsistent that way. The whole movie is inconsistent. Number 10 spot is going to piss off a lot of people. And I understand people absolutely loving this film. For me, it just wasn't that good. And it's not that it's not good. It's just one of those movies that feels like... It's just one of those movies I'm glad I watched one time, but I have no need to see it again because there's like nothing to it, in my opinion. So number 10, sad to say, is Inherent Vice. And before you start typing in comments, how could you dislike Inherent Vice and start pushing the thumbs down button? Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I'm glad that there's some people that liked Inherent Vice. There is a lot of things to it that I do like. But for me, it feels like one of those movies that is just mainly made just to try to realistically add the era and the decade of this fear and panic and paranoia. And it does things really well with that, as well as it establishes this drug use as well. And at the same time, it is confusing, and it feels like it fits in the head of the character because he's drugged up a lot of the times. But at the same time, it doesn't make a good and interesting story for me. It's like the tone is great, the setting is great, there's things that are great about it, but the character is a little too wacky, the movie is way too long, and the story is way too confusing to the point where it feels like it's trying to do everything in its power to make it as confusing and as convoluted as possible. For me, that doesn't make a good film. It just makes something that I want to get over with and done and figure out the twist, and it's too much. There was a point in this movie where I paused the movie, looked at how much I have spent watching this movie, and I saw that I've spent a whole movie's worth watching this movie. I think I was about an hour and 45 minutes into it, and I was thinking, after knowing what just happened just now at this point, it makes it feel like everything I had watched previously, everything that led up to this moment, had no meaning whatsoever, to the point where it could have been just thrown away and it wouldn't add anything to the and nothing would be lost to the story. It felt like a complete waste of time, in all honesty, and that's why I have to give it 2 stars, because there are some great things to it. I love that some people love this movie, and I can see a lot of things that people can love about it. But for me, it's just not a movie that I like, and I'm still going to look into movies that this director has done, because I'm sure I'll like some of his movies, but Inherent Vice is just one of those movies I don't like. Alright, number 9 is a film that, you know what, I kind of admired, I kind of liked, but at the same time, it's only because it is better than the last sequel that has come out, and it is Taken 3. And again, it's another 2-star movie, so it's not anything I would say that I liked, it's just something that I could watch it for the first time. I can have some things that I like about it, but there's plenty of flaws that make it a meh kind of movie. And that is the action sequences. And while the fighting is chopped up to a point where it is confusing to some people, I felt that out of all the movies that are chopped up into pieces when it comes to the action and the fighting, this one handled it pretty well to the point where I could understand what was going on. The chase scenes, however, every single chase scene in Taken 3 is god-awful and makes no sense. There's a point in some of them where it feels like it's just cutting together all the cliched moments in a chase scene, putting it in, and not filling anything within the cliches. So you got these moments where it feels like it just jumps in time, and you don't really see him running to point. You just see him getting to this point, getting to this point, getting to this point in the chase, but you never see him running between those points, and it's so freaking lazy it feels. And there's some acting in this movie that I actually liked. Liam Neeson was good. I felt the relationship between him and his daughter was just as great as the other films, but that's only because we've seen 2 other films to completely develop this relationship. And I thought that him and his ex-wife had a really good connection as well. Like, I really felt bad when she died in this movie, and maybe it's because of the other 2 movies we spent with developing her character, if you can say that, but there are some things that I felt I could still like out of a Taken movie, and obviously the first Taken is by far the best, but Taken 3 is okay and way better than Taken 2. Okay, number 8 is a time-traveling movie, the other time-traveling movie this year. You know what, I'm one of those people that still feel that there could be a really good gem within the found footage franchise. Yes, there's way too many right now, but that doesn't mean that all found footage films are absolutely horrible. And there are some moments in Project Almanac that I feel is commendable and pretty decent to the found footage franchise. Granted, there's a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of mistakes that are in Project Almanac when it comes to the time traveling, because it leads to a certain belief that this is how time traveling works in this film, but then they throw out that rule and they do something completely different, and it's inconsistent. Okay, number 7 is the worst film that I would give 2 stars to. So it's still not considered a bad movie in my opinion, even though overall it is pretty disappointing, and that is Mordecai. Yeah, I know it's the same old Johnny Depp playing a cartoony character and being over the top. Yes, it completely is, and I'm not too old of Johnny Depp to still have some fun with his acting. And he's a little too cartoony for my taste, but at the same time, it's still decent. There's a lot of things in Mordecai where it feels like it doesn't really know what it wants to be. Is it trying to be a spoof off of spy movies? Is it trying to be a spoof off of heist movies? Is it trying to be serious or comical? Is it trying to go with dark humor? What is it trying to be? And I think the first half of the film is almost unbearable. There's some good moments in it, but it's mostly unbearable. But at the same time, the second half of the movie, that's where it soars, and it feels like you find out what it's trying to be. There's a couple of dark and serious moments in it that are more of dark comedy, and it becomes more of the caper that it feels like it was trying to be in the first place. And so the second half of the movie is likable, in my opinion. Okay, so number 6, and the best of the movies that I actually consider bad movies, is a movie that some people actually kind of like and actually has a pretty decent score on Rotten Tomatoes, and that is Pitch Perfect 2. Now, I was kind of a fan of Pitch Perfect when I first watched it, but after being forced to watch it over and over again, it got really boring and the laughs just never came. And so when Pitch Perfect 2 comes out and it feels like it's going to be the same old thing, it felt like I thought it was going to feel like I've seen Pitch Perfect 1 67 times now rather than like 66 or something like that. And for the most part, yeah, it tries to copy a lot of the same things that the first film did. There are some unique moments to it and some moments that are legitimately good and some parts that are funny, but overall, Pitch Perfect is just sort of a big disappointment and just a movie that I consider bad, but it has potential, so it's a 1.5 star for me. So now we're going to the 5 movies that a lot of people are probably going to agree with as really bad, awful movies. And number 5 is Paul Blart Mall Cop 2. The first one I actually enjoy, and while it's not a high rating, it's probably more of a 3 or a 3.5. I felt it was pretty good because it felt like a parody of Die Hard, and not to the point where it was making fun of Die Hard, but still making it its unique self while still staying with certain plot points that Die Hard had. And a lot of the parody is very subtle to the point where some people might not even realize it feels like a parody to Die Hard. But with that said, Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 feels like a parody of Paul Blart Mall Cop and feels like a more annoying, more in-your-face, more over-the-top version of Paul Blart Mall Cop, and Paul Blart Mall Cop 2 is just a real big disappointment. The last 1.5 star on this list is number 4, and that is The Boy Next Door. Yeah, similar to Mordecai, The Boy Next Door had a terrible first half with a good and entertaining second half. I think the second half saves it into being a 1.5 star movie, but where Mordecai had a bad first half, Boy Next Door has an even worse first half, to the point where it felt like a really cheesy, almost a really comically bad romance film. It's so god-awful that I was just laughing the entire time through the first half of the movie. But then the second half comes, it gets more intense. There's some scenes that are legitimately suspenseful and has more of a thriller element. And there are some moments where it actually gets graphic, bloody, and feels like an R-rated movie. And that's what all of it should have been throughout. And it could have been an entertaining, actually fun movie. But instead it's a bad movie that has an entertaining, decent second half. Okay, so number 3, there's some things that I can enjoy about it as well, so that's why it's a 1-star movie. But overall, it is a completely boring and forced movie, and it is Black Hat. Now, I have to give it some credit. When it comes to the action scenes, it actually raises the bar each time. There's 4 action scenes. The first action scene was awful, way too shaky, and just terrible. Well, then the second action scene happens, and it's pretty damn good. It's a good gunfight. Third action scene is cliched in the dramatic sense of a shootout, but at the same time, it is enjoyable. The last action sequence feels unique and really good. So it builds with the action sequences. The problem with the movie is everything in between those action sequences is horribly boring, terribly acted, and just mind-bogglingly dumb. It just doesn't work as a thriller. It doesn't work as an action film. It tries to be a drama. It fails at that. It tries to have a romance subplot. It feels way too forced, to the point where it feels like they don't really know each other, and then suddenly they're kissing in the next scene, and it's like, what the hell? Black Hat is a horrible movie. There's only one reason this movie has a half star, and that's only because I laughed one time. There was one sequence where I laughed, and because there was one thing that I found funny, I couldn't completely give it a 0. That is Hot Tub Time Machine 2. Oh my god. It was a complete waste of time. I am just so glad I did not see this in theaters, and I'm so glad I got to see it free and didn't have to pay money to frickin' see this terrible movie. Now, there's some people that like the first Hot Tub Time Machine, and I understand it. There's some people that think it's incredible, and I know a few people that really enjoyed the movie. I could not stand the first film, so why would I like the second film? Well, I just wanted to see it so I could put something at the bottom of my list, because I was hearing a lot of people that are fans of the first film absolutely hated the second film. So when I saw it, I go, yep, I didn't think it was possible, but they made it even worse. It is awful. And it centers around the person that I hate the most in the 2 movies. The Dick character, it centers around him to the point where it's like you're supposed to care about him, but I can't in any way care for that character. Ugh, it is awful. And there's this one scene that is poorly edited. It's like, when I saw it, I couldn't believe it. I had to go back several times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. But yeah, there's several moments in this one scene where they don't cut it quick enough, and there's points where you'll see them sitting on a couch, right? And they start getting up. Well, then the next time it cuts to them in that same scene, they're sitting comfortably on the couch as if they had never stood up. And it does it 3 points in the same scene, and it is awful. It feels like a horrible mistake I can't believe they allowed in the movie. Now, where Hot Tub Time Machine actually had one moment where I laughed, the same cannot be said by this movie. My number 1 worst film of 2015, and will probably stay the worst film of 2015, is Hot Pursuit. It is a hot mess. It is horrible. Characters are completely annoying. Nothing redeemable about them. It is unfunny. I cannot connect with any of the characters' relationships because it doesn't feel like, it feels forced. It doesn't feel like it melds in a way that is cohesive and makes sense. And even though they have a commendable twist, you have to go through a bunch of horrible crap to get to that twist. And there's one scene that could have been amusing, but it wasn't because I had gone through the movie not laughing so much and just wanting to just leave the theater, and just that I couldn't even find that amusing. And it is the worst film, in my opinion, of 2015. It definitely deserves a 0. And it's hard to believe anyone could like it. I'm sure there's people out there that like it. If you like it, that's fine by you. But I can't even fathom what a person must seem like for liking this film. It's unbearably awful. It is way worse than any of the films that I have just stated, and worse than some of the films that other people hate that I kind of like. So yeah, those are my top 15 worst films of 2015 so far. What did you think about it? Do you have a similar list? What is your worst 15, or simply what is your worst films of 2015 so far? Go ahead and comment. I'd like to hear your opinions. But as always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.